Megan had her sister relay the message to disinvite me from her wedding because she feared my autism and panic attacks might ruin everything. Then she suggested I send my prettier friend instead. When I confronted her at the reception, she smiled tightly and said, "You ruined my special day. Now I'm going to ruin your life." I stayed silent. That was 11 months ago. Last week, she was released from court in handcuffs screaming my name. You know, sometimes life just punches you in the gut when you least expect it. I mean, how do you even begin to process it when someone you thought was a friend tries to literally destroy your entire life just because you have autism? My world was turned upside down that day, and honestly, the sheer injustice of it still makes my blood boil. It all started so innocently. Me and Megan, we were just getting our nails done for her wedding. Nothing fancy, just delicate baby pink chrome with tiny little pearls. And that's when my phone rang. It was Kate, Megan's sister, and her voice was dripping with awkwardness. "Hey babe, so this is super awkward," she started, "but Megan wanted me to tell you. She thinks it's best if you don't come to the wedding." My heart just plummeted. She went on, "She's worried about your autism and the panic attacks ruining everything. You understand, right? But bring your pretty friend Katie instead." I hung up. The nail tech froze, a pearl suspended midair. Megan's face, usually so full of herself, went absolutely ghost white. She started stammering out some pathetic excuses, but I wasn't listening. Not anymore. I just slammed the money onto the counter, my wet nails smudging as I fumbled, and then I just ran. Straight out the door. 3 hours later, I was a mascara-streaked mess at my friend Michaela's house. When I told her everything, her face turned even redder than mine. Her daughter, Lily, also has autism, so this hit her differently. "She did not just uninvite you for being autistic," she seethed, her voice tight with fury. Then Michaela got on the phone, a woman on a mission. Within an hour, her living room was packed. Wine, cheese, fancy Dubai chocolate. I had to physically restrain myself from just violently hugging all these amazing women to death. "Tell us everything," Sarah demanded, her eyes wide. When I explained, the room fell silent. "This hoe," Maria whispered, disgust clear in her voice. Then Michaela announced, "Ladies, we're going shopping tomorrow." "For what?" I asked, utterly bewildered. "Your wedding outfit, obviously," she said, refusing to elaborate further. The next day, 7 of us descended on Nordstrom like a well-oiled SWAT team. Too boring, too casual, too forgiving. Then Sophie pulled it out, the dress. White silk, cut like a dream, expensive as hell. "I can't wear white to her wedding," I exclaimed, my voice probably a little too loud. But Michaela cut in, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Did she or did she not say this day was about making things special?" she challenged. "This looks pretty special to me." Sarah grabbed accessories. Rebecca found the perfect shoes. Maria picked out dazzling jewelry. Rachel selected a clutch. Sophie, already on her phone, planned my entire makeup look. But the old fear crept in. "What if she kicks me out?" I whispered. Michaela just smiled. "Then she has to tell everyone why you're not supposed to be there." In that moment, all these women I'd barely known suddenly became my sisters. Period. 3 weeks flew by. 3 weeks of preparation, daily affirmations, brutal workout sessions, rigorous skincare routines, the works. "Remember," Michaela coached, "if anyone asks, Megan specifically told you to wear white. She said it would be meaningful." I knew it was a lie, but it felt right. "But she didn't." I protested. "She said to make it special, right?" she countered. "White is special." Even I couldn't argue with that logic. Then came the morning of the wedding. Michaela arrived at my doorstep at 7 a.m., coffee and backup in hand. Sophie did my makeup like I was about to walk a red carpet, contour that could cut glass. I actually felt like a baddie. Rebecca styled my hair in Hollywood waves. Maria documented the entire transformation. Sarah kept pouring champagne, while Rachel steamed the dress to perfection. "You look like a snack," Michaela breathed, her eyes shining with pride. We rolled up to the venue 15 minutes after the ceremony had started. Strategic timing. Michaela squeezed my hand. "Remember, she basically told you to wear white, so put your confidence on level 10. I walked in during a quiet moment, my heels clicking on the marble floor. The entire congregation turned. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I just smiled, waved at a few familiar faces, and slid into a back pew like nothing was wrong. "Oh my gosh, you look amazing," Megan's cousin whispered to me. "That dress ate." I winked. "Thanks." Megan specifically asked me to wear white. Said it would be meaningful for today. The whispers spread like wildfire. People were turning to stare, phones snapping photos. After the ceremony, the chaos multiplied. "Girl, you look insane. That dress is so slay. Wait, Megan asked you to wear white? That's so sweet." I floated through cocktail hour, crowds forming around me, compliments flowing. Instagram stories were popping up everywhere. Megan finally found me by the bar, her face a terrifying shade of purple under her veil. "What are you doing here? And why are you wearing white?" she hissed. I smiled sweetly, deliberately loud. "You told me to wear white, remember? The call about making everything perfect." Her eyes went wide, trapped. She couldn't deny it without explaining why she'd uninvited me. That's not, oh my goodness, girls." Her college friends appeared, oblivious. "You both look stunning. How sweet that you coordinated." Megan's smile looked painful. "Yes, so sweet." The photographer appeared. "Let's get some shots of you two. The white dress with the wedding gown is giving Vogue." Megan couldn't refuse, not without causing an even bigger scene. We posed, her grimacing, me absolutely glowing. The reception was magical. Every time Megan tried to approach, someone new would sweep me away. Michaela and her squad worked the room, hyping me up, redirecting attention, making sure I was seen, celebrated. During speeches, multiple people mentioned how beautiful both ladies in white looked. Megan's eye twitched each time. The DJ played "Girls Just Wanna Have Fun" and dragged me onto the dance floor. Megan sat at her sweetheart table, watching her wedding become my fashion show. Her wedding album, I realized, would be nothing but a ruined mess where her autistic ex-friends stole every single shot. On the drive home, Michaela almost crashed because she was laughing so hard describing Megan's face when I walked in. I was laughing so hard my eyes were watering. I woke up the next morning in Michaela's bed with a fat hangover. Michaela was already at the door, talking to a woman in a pink suit. When I heard what was going on, my heart dropped. It was a social worker coming to investigate Michaela's home after anonymous claims that she was sexually abusing Lily. I immediately knew it was Megan. The social worker sat on Michaela's couch with a clipboard while a man in a gray suit photographed the living room. Michaela's hands were shaking so bad she couldn't hold the paper steady as she read the ridiculous accusations that she supposedly touched Lily inappropriately during therapy sessions. I ran inside. Just as Detective Morrison was explaining that they had to investigate every claim, no matter how crazy it sounded. Lily was in the corner, playing with her rainbow sorting blocks, but kept looking up at all these strangers in her house. Morrison started asking Michaela about their daily routine, how she helped Lily with sensory stuff like deep pressure hugs and joint compressions. He wrote down everything, and as he did, Lily started rocking harder and harder in her corner. When Morrison tried to approach her with his clipboard, she completely lost it, screaming and hitting herself. Michaela had to show him how she calmed Lily down with firm pressure on her shoulders, while the social worker watched and took notes about every single touch. The way Morrison wrote things down made normal autism therapy sound creepy and wrong. I grabbed the report from Michaela's trembling hands and started reading. My stomach dropped. The report said Michaela showed attention-seeking behavior and was making everything about disability. These were the exact same words Megan had used at her wedding when she'd cornered me by the bar. A cold dread settled in. I pulled out my phone and showed Morrison the Instagram video Sophie had posted, the one where you could clearly see Megan's face getting angrier and angrier every time someone complimented my dress. Morrison looked at the timestamps and admitted the timing was suspicious, but said, "Angry brides don't automatically mean false reports." That night, after Morrison finally left, I helped Michaela get Lily ready for bed. Lily kept signing, scared, over and over with her little hands, while Michaela tried so hard not to cry. After Lily finally fell asleep, Michaela dragged her blanket and pillow onto Lily's bedroom floor. She was terrified CPS would come take her in the middle of the night. I stayed up, calling Sophie and Rebecca and everyone else from our wedding prep group. Sophie, a wizard with tech, went through all her videos frame by frame and found one where Kate was whispering to Megan, and you could actually read her lips saying something about teaching us both a lesson. Rebecca screenshotted every single photo from the wedding where Megan looked mad. Sarah found the venue's photographer's Instagram and saved everything before Megan could even think about asking them to delete stuff. 3 days later, Michaela met with a family lawyer who specialized in fake CPS cases. He told us the investigation could take 2 whole months. Her boss gave her emergency leave, but she knew everyone at work was already gossiping, wondering why she'd suddenly disappeared. Morrison came back a week later with some child specialist who was supposed to interview Lily with her communication device. The specialist kept asking Lily about bad touches, which Lily, an 8-year-old autistic child, didn't understand at all. She doesn't think about bodies that way. When Lily started flapping her hands and making noises, the specialist wrote down that she seemed agitated when discussing abuse, even though Lily always flaps when she's confused. It was infuriating. I spent hours scrolling through Facebook groups until I found one for Portland moms where Megan had posted 2 days before the CPS call about her concerns about a friend who uses her child's disability for attention and sympathy. I screenshotted everything before she could delete it and send it straight to Morrison. Rebecca showed up at Michaela's house with bags of groceries and found her putting foam corners on already safe furniture and locks on cabinets that didn't need them. Lily hadn't been to school in over a week, and without her routine, she was having meltdowns every few hours, which Michaela was terrified would look bad to CPS. Sophie, ever the detective, did some digging and discovered that Megan's cousin, Ashley, worked at the exact same therapy center where Lily got her occupational therapy every Tuesday. Ashley had access to all of Lily's session notes and her therapy schedule. She probably gave Megan all the specific details that made the report sound so chillingly real. I drove straight to the therapy center and waited in the parking lot until Ashley came out for lunch. I hit record on my phone and walked right up to her car. She looked absolutely terrified when she saw me and tried to roll up her window, but I asked her really loud, "Did Megan pay you to look at Lily's private medical files?" A thought flashed through my mind. How did Kate know exactly where to hit to make this hurt the most, using autism as the reason, when that's literally what Lily has too? And how did those 7 women organize that whole shopping trip so fast? Ashley's face went white. She started stammering about how she didn't know what I was talking about, but then she slipped. Megan just wanted to make sure we learned our lesson about ruining her special day. I got the whole thing recorded before she realized what she'd said and peeled out of the parking lot. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely drive, but I knew this recording was huge. I went straight to Sophie's apartment and played it for her 3 times while she typed everything out word for word. She made copies on 5 different flash drives and uploaded it to her cloud storage. We called Morrison's office, but his voicemail said he was out doing home visits until Monday. A week later, Morrison showed up at Michaela's door without warning, right when Lily was having her worst meltdown in months. She was screaming and hitting herself, and Michaela had to wrap her arms around her tight to stop her from banging her head on the floor. Morrison stood in the doorway, watching Michaela use the deep pressure hold her therapist taught her while Lily thrashed and cried. He kept asking if this was normal and if the restraint was necessary, and I could see him writing notes about physical contact and forceful restraint. Michaela tried to explain about sensory processing and how the pressure actually calms Lily's nervous system, but Morrison just kept frowning and taking pictures of how tight Michaela was holding her. After he left, I couldn't sleep for 3 nights straight. At 2 a.m., I found myself parked outside Megan's house, just sitting there in the dark. Part of me wanted to bang on her door and scream at her about what she was doing to an innocent kid. My phone was in my hand, ready to text her everything I thought about her. But I knew any contact would look bad for Michaela's case. Instead, I drove back to Michaela's and slept on her couch, keys in my hand like some kind of guard dog. The next morning, Morrison called to say they'd contacted Lily's father in Seattle about the investigation. Michaela hadn't heard from her ex in 3 years, since he'd signed away his rights. But suddenly, he was very concerned about his daughter's safety. I remembered Megan mentioning she'd dated some tech guy from Seattle last year, and my stomach dropped. 2 days later, we were at Lily's therapy center for her regular session when her occupational therapist pulled us aside. She'd gotten a call from CPS asking about Michaela's parenting, and she wanted to help. The therapist spent an hour writing a detailed report about sensory integration therapy and how things like weighted vests and deep pressure can look strange to people who don't understand autism. She explained how Lily's sensory needs were medical, not abuse, and attached research studies and treatment plans. Morrison actually showed up while we were there, and the therapist walked him through everything, showing him videos of other kids using the same techniques. For the first time, I saw him nodding like maybe he was starting to get it. That night at 11 o'clock, my phone rang, and it was Kate, sobbing and slurring her words. She kept saying Megan went too far this time, and she felt sick about what they did. She admitted Megan spent hours researching what words would trigger a CPS investigation and made Kate practice exactly what to say on the phone. I hit record and asked her to repeat everything. But as soon as I mentioned making an official statement, she hung up and wouldn't answer my calls. Sophie came over the next morning with her laptop and a massive timeline she'd been building. She had screenshots from the nail salon incident, the wedding uninvite call records, every Facebook post Megan made, and now the CPS report, all laid out chronologically. The pattern was so obvious when you saw it all together. Each attack getting worse after we didn't give Megan the reaction she wanted. Morrison agreed to review it, but said he still had to investigate every claim thoroughly. 2 weeks had passed since the report, and Michaela looked like a ghost. She'd dropped 15 pounds she didn't have to lose, and her hands shook constantly. Lily had completely stopped using the communication board she'd worked so hard to master, and was back to just pointing and crying. I started coming over every morning to help with Lily's routine, taking videos of every therapy exercise and logging every meltdown and recovery. On Tuesday, Michaela called me crying from her car because Megan had shown up at her office. Security footage showed Megan walking around the parking lot, taking pictures of Michaela's license plate and car. She went inside and told the receptionist she had concerns about an unsafe employee working with sensitive data. Michaela's boss called her into his office and suggested she take unpaid leave until the investigation was resolved, for everyone's comfort. Rebecca and I spent the next day tracking down 3 women who used to be friends with Megan in college. They all had similar stories about cutting her off after she made false accusations when they stood up to her. One woman still had text messages from 5 years ago where Megan bragged about getting someone fired by calling their job with complaints. She forwarded everything to us and said she'd testify if needed, but she was scared of becoming Megan's target again. Morrison interviewed all of Lily's teachers that week, and they couldn't say enough good things about Michaela's advocacy and involvement. But then the substitute teacher mentioned seeing strange bruises on Lily's arms that looked like grip marks. They were actually just pressure marks from Lily's sensory vest that fade after an hour. But Morrison added it to his file as another concern. 3 weeks crawled by with Morrison calling every other day, asking for more documents and more interviews and more proof that Michaela wasn't some kind of monster. Then came the letter demanding she undergo a full psychological evaluation or risk immediate removal of Lily from the home. I drove Michaela to the appointment because her hands were shaking too bad to grip the wheel. The evaluator's office smelled like vanilla candles and judgment. Michaela sat on that leather couch, answering questions about her childhood trauma and her divorce and her parenting style while I waited in the lobby, reading the same magazine 3 times. When she came out 2 hours later, her eyes were red and puffy. She told me she broke down crying when they asked if she felt capable of protecting Lily from harm, because how could she protect her daughter from something that wasn't even real? The evaluator wrote emotional instability in her notes, which Michaela saw upside down on the clipboard. Sophie called that night saying her husband, who does tech stuff, wanted to help. He spent the next 3 days tracking the anonymous CPS call through phone records and digital traces. The call came from a burner phone bought with cash at a convenience store 2 blocks from Megan's gym. On the same day, she posted Instagram stories from her morning workout class. We needed the security footage from the store, but the owner said it would take weeks to get approval from corporate. I found Lily the next afternoon, hiding in her bedroom closet, arranging her stuffed animals in perfect rows while rocking back and forth. She'd pulled all her comfort items into the small space and was organizing them over and over in the same pattern. I sat on the floor outside the closet door for 3 hours, not saying anything, because I knew she needed the quiet. Every few minutes I'd hear her whisper numbers under her breath, like she was counting to keep herself calm. My phone buzzed with a text from Kate saying we needed to meet right now and she couldn't explain over text. I met her at a Starbucks parking lot where she handed me Megan's old phone that she'd kept after Megan upgraded. The phone had screenshots of Megan researching reasons CPS removes children and how to report child abuse anonymously, and texts to someone named Ashley about handling the situation after the wedding. Kate's hands were shaking as she told me she was moving to California next week because she couldn't handle being near her sister anymore. I begged her to come with me to Morrison's office, but she said Megan would destroy her life if she testified. Morrison looked at the phone evidence the next morning and shook his head. Without Kate's sworn testimony, it was just hearsay and wouldn't hold up in court. I called Kate 17 times that day, but she'd already blocked my number and her apartment was empty when I drove by. 4 days later, a process server showed up at my office during our Monday morning meeting. He handed me papers in front of my entire team, saying I was being served with a restraining order for harassment and stalking. Megan claimed I'd been following her and making threats, and she feared for her safety. The order meant I had to stay 500 feet away from her at all times, which made gathering any more evidence basically impossible. My boss pulled me aside after the meeting, asking if I needed to take some time off to handle my personal situation. Rebecca texted me that night with a link to the wedding photographer's website where he'd posted outtakes from Megan's reception. The photos showed Megan grabbing people's arms and pointing at me with this twisted expression on her face. One photo caught her mid-scream at an elderly aunt who looked terrified. The comment section was full of guests saying they'd never seen a bride act so unhinged at her own wedding and asking if she was okay. I screenshotted everything before Megan could get them taken down. 2 mornings later, Michaela called me, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. She'd gone to wake Lily up for breakfast and found patches of hair on her pillow. Lily had been pulling her own hair out during the night and now had bald spots near her temples. The pediatrician documented it as stress-induced trichotillomania and added it to Lily's medical file as a concerning development requiring immediate intervention. Lily pulling out her own hair in her sleep makes me wonder how a little kid's brain handles stress they can't even put into words. How does Morrison not see that all these concerning developments started exactly when his investigation began? Michaela started sleeping on Lily's bedroom floor that night because she was terrified to leave her alone for even a minute. Morrison called us both into his office the following Monday, and I knew from his face it was bad news. He said CPS was considering temporary foster placement while they completed their investigation because the accumulating concerns suggested potential risk. Michaela collapsed onto the floor, begging him to understand that taking Lily away would destroy her completely. She grabbed his desk, explaining how Lily couldn't handle changes and would shut down entirely with strangers. Morrison gave us 1 more week before the final decision would be made. Since I couldn't go near Megan without getting arrested, I started sitting in my car with binoculars, documenting her from exactly 501 feet away. I watched her laughing at brunch with friends and shopping for designer bags and getting her nails done like she hadn't just tried to destroy a child's life. She posted Instagram stories about cutting toxic people out and protecting your peace, while a little girl was pulling her hair out from the trauma Megan caused. Sophie called me the next morning with an idea that made me drop my coffee mug. She wanted to set up a playdate between Lily and her nephew, who was also on the spectrum. Morrison had been pushing for Lily to socialize more, but every attempt with regular kids ended in meltdowns. Sophie brought her nephew over that afternoon and something magical happened. For the first time in weeks, Lily actually smiled when the 2 kids started lining up toy cars together. They didn't talk or even look at each other, but they played side by side for 2 whole hours. Michaela grabbed her phone and recorded everything while tears ran down her face. Sophie's nephew showed Lily his special spinning toy, and she let him touch her favorite blanket, which she never let anyone near. Morrison showed up for a surprise visit right as the kids were sharing goldfish crackers and actually saw Lily engaging with another child. He took notes and asked Sophie questions about her nephew's diagnosis, while Michaela sent me the videos through Rebecca since I still couldn't contact her directly. 5 weeks after that first CPS report, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end made my blood run cold because it was Tom, Megan's new husband. He said he needed to meet me urgently and wouldn't say why over the phone. We met at a Starbucks downtown where he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone and showed me photos of a notebook he'd found hidden in Megan's closet. Page after page of detailed plans about destroying me and Michaela, with research on triggering CPS investigations dating back months before the wedding. She'd written about finding my triggers and using my autism against me, and even researched which anonymous tips would get the fastest response. Tom said he was thinking about divorce, but was scared of what she might do to him. My lawyer finally got us a hearing date to fight the restraining order 3 weeks out. The judge agreed it looked retaliatory, but I still had to communicate with Michaela only through Rebecca, which made everything harder. Rebecca became our messenger, driving between our apartments with updates and videos of Lily. The stress was destroying Lily, who started refusing everything except 5 specific foods. She would only eat plain pasta, white bread, apple slices, chicken nuggets from one specific brand, and milk in her special cup. Her weight dropped 8 pounds in 2 weeks, which was terrifying for a kid her size. The nutritionist CPS added another report to their file about concerns over Lily's limited diet, even though Michaela explained it was a trauma response. Morrison made another surprise visit, but the house was empty because Michaela had taken Lily to a specialist appointment she'd forgotten to tell him about. He wrote in his report that the parent was unavailable for a scheduled visit with the child's whereabouts unknown, which looked terrible on paper, even though it was just bad timing. Tom sent me an encrypted email the next day with scanned pages from Megan's journal. The stuff she wrote made me sick to my stomach, with detailed plans to destroy what she called the art lovers and research on exactly which complaints would trigger investigations. She'd been planning this since before the wedding, which meant she invited me just to humiliate me. 6 weeks after the initial report, Rebecca decided she'd had enough. She spotted Megan at a coffee shop and started live streaming on Instagram before walking up to her table. Megan tried to leave, but Rebecca kept the camera on her, asking why she was trying to destroy a little girl's life. Megan actually said on camera that she had to protect children from people like that before realizing she was being recorded. The stream got shared in every local mom group and parenting page before Megan could get it taken down, but hundreds of people had already screen recorded it. Morrison came for another visit to observe Lily's bedtime routine, which was the most structured part of her day. He watched Michaela use picture cards to show Lily each step, the weighted blanket that helped her calm down, and the exact sequence of songs and stories that helped her feel safe. For the first time, he seemed to really understand their bond and even helped hold up the picture cards. My autism advocacy group found out what was happening and went into full support mode. Within a week, 30 families had written letters about how Michaela had helped them navigate their kids' diagnoses. Parents described how she'd spent hours on the phone walking them through meltdowns and sharing resources and connecting them with specialists. The stack of testimonials was 3 inches thick, challenging everything CPS thought they knew about Michaela as a parent. I woke up at 3 a.m. to my neighbor banging on my door, saying someone had destroyed my car. All 4 tires were slashed and "Stop or Else" was spray-painted across the windshield in red paint. The security cameras for our building had mysteriously gone offline right before it happened. I knew it was Megan, but had no way to prove it, and the cops said without evidence they couldn't do anything. 2 days later, Morrison called asking if I could meet him at his office because there had been some new developments in the case. When I got there, he had this thick manila folder on his desk and his whole attitude was different from before. He slid a journal across the desk and told me to read the highlighted parts. It was Megan's handwriting, talking about how she was going to destroy me and Michaela for humiliating her at the wedding. She wrote about making the CPS call from a burner phone and how she'd keep making reports until we were both ruined. The journal came from Tom, Megan's husband, who had filed for divorce that morning and brought everything to Morrison as evidence. Morrison said Tom had been suspicious for weeks and started collecting proof after Megan kept ranting about revenge every night. The next page showed credit card records from a phone store near Megan's office. Morrison pulled up security footage on his computer showing Megan buying a prepaid phone the morning before the CPS report was filed. The timestamp matched her lunch break, and her credit card was used for the purchase. Morrison drove to Megan's house that afternoon to confront her about the evidence. She claimed she was buying the phone for a coworker who needed help, but couldn't explain why she paid cash for the minutes or why the phone number matched the anonymous tip. Morrison told her he was opening an investigation into filing false reports, which was a felony. Megan started crying and said she was just trying to protect children from dangerous people. Meanwhile, Michaela had been taking Lily to therapy sessions 3 times a week since the investigation started. The poor kid hadn't spoken a word in almost 7 weeks and would just cling to her mom during every visit. The therapist said it was trauma response from strangers coming to their house and asking scary questions. But that Tuesday, when Michaela was telling Lily how hard she was fighting to keep her safe, Lily looked up and whispered, "Mama," for the first time in weeks. The therapist immediately documented this breakthrough in her notes, writing that stability and feeling secure were critical for Lily's recovery. Michaela called me, sobbing happy tears, and I drove straight over to celebrate. That's when my phone started blowing up with messages from Kate, who was getting crazy voicemails from Megan. Kate had moved to California for a new job, but Megan tracked down her number and left 17 messages in 1 hour. The voicemails got worse each time, with Megan screaming that she would ruin Kate's life, too, if she said anything to anyone about the wedding or the phone call. Kate forwarded everything to my lawyer, who said it showed a clear pattern of threats and intimidation. Morrison called me the next week, saying he was officially recommending the case against Michaela be closed with no finding of abuse. The evidence showed the report was false and made with malicious intent. But then his supervisor wanted to review everything because of the unusual circumstances, which meant another 2-week delay before final approval. Michaela was devastated because Lily still couldn't go back to school until the case was completely closed. Tom had been planning his escape for weeks and waited until Megan left for work to pack everything. He took all the evidence he'd been collecting, including her journal, printed emails, and recorded conversations where she admitted to making false reports. When Megan came home that night, she found an empty house and divorce papers on the kitchen counter. I watched from my car, parked down the street, as she ran outside screaming at neighbors about being betrayed and abandoned. She was yelling that Tom was a coward and would regret leaving her. How did Tom manage to secretly collect all that evidence while living with Megan every single day? The way he found her journal and recorded conversations without her noticing shows incredible planning. I'm really curious about what finally made him decide to help after watching this happen for weeks. The neighbors just went inside and closed their doors. 3 days later, we had the restraining order hearing that Megan had filed against me, claiming I was stalking and harassing her. The judge reviewed all the evidence my lawyer presented, including the vandalism report, Tom's testimony about the false CPS report, and Kate's voicemails showing Megan's threats. The judge asked Megan to explain why she felt threatened, and she started screaming about protecting children from dangerous people like us. She actually stood up in court, yelling that people with autism shouldn't be allowed near kids and that she was doing the right thing. The bailiff had to escort her out while she kept screaming about how we'd all pay for this. The judge dismissed the restraining order as retaliatory harassment and warned Megan that any further false reports would result in criminal charges. Sophie had been busy reaching out to everyone from the wedding to get their stories about Megan's behavior. Within a week, she had 17 written statements from guests describing how Megan had acted strange all night and had a history of getting revenge on people. 3 bridesmaids said Megan had done similar things in college to roommates who upset her. Her cousin mentioned Megan had tried to get a coworker fired by making false complaints to HR. The pattern went back years, with Megan destroying anyone who crossed her. Sophie compiled everything into a document for my lawyer to use as evidence of Megan's long history of vindictive behavior. Finally, after 7 weeks, Michaela was cleared to take Lily back to school. That morning, Lily wore her favorite purple dress and held her mom's hand so tight her knuckles were white. At the school entrance, Lily started crying and wouldn't let go. But Michaela knelt down and promised she'd be right there to pick her up. After a few minutes, Lily's favorite teacher came out and gently led her inside to join her class. The teacher called Michaela an hour later, saying Lily was doing art with her friends and seemed relieved to be back in her routine. 8 weeks after the CPS report, I decided to confront Megan at her workplace since the restraining order was dismissed. I waited in the parking lot until she came out for lunch and started recording on my phone before walking over. She saw me coming and her face went red as she started backing toward her car. I asked her why she did all this over a wedding, and she laughed, saying I had no idea what she was capable of. She said she would make new accusations every week and file reports with every agency until Michaela lost Lily and I lost everything. She promised she would never stop until we were all destroyed, and there was nothing we could do to stop her. That's when I noticed the security camera right above us recording everything she just said. The guard inside the building was already on his phone, watching the feed. And 2 minutes later, Morrison himself pulled up with another officer. He watched the footage on the guard's phone while Megan stood there getting paler and paler. Morrison told her not to leave town and took copies of everything for his supervisor. Back at Michaela's house, we installed 3 new cameras that same day because she kept checking the windows every 5 minutes. The next morning, Morrison called to say his boss reviewed everything, including Tom's journal pages, where Megan wrote about destroying us, and they were opening a criminal case. Michaela started noticing this blue sedan following her to Lily's therapy appointments. So, she took pictures of the license plate and changed her routes every day. She installed a dash cam and door sensors and kept Lily home from school for a week. 2 months after the whole mess started, Kate flew back from California where she'd been hiding from Megan's drama. She sat in Morrison's office for 4 hours, describing how Megan coached her on exactly what to say for the CPS call and showed texts going back 3 years of Megan doing this same stuff to other people. Kate said Megan made her practice the call 5 times to sound convincing and promised to pay for her vacation if she did it right. Morrison's team found 7 other false reports Megan had filed against coworkers and neighbors over the years. Meanwhile, the wedding guests who saw me in white started calling Megan's work to complain about her discriminating against disabled people at her own wedding. Her company's HR department got 14 complaints in 1 week, including 3 from clients who were at the wedding. They put her on leave while they investigated and found emails on her work computer about her plans to get me fired from my job, too. Morrison came by Michaela's house one last time to officially close our case and apologize for what we went through. Lily actually walked up to him and gave him a hug, which made Michaela cry because Lily hadn't touched anyone besides us since the investigation started. 3 days later, 2 officers showed up at Megan's apartment with an arrest warrant for filing false reports and criminal harassment. Her mugshot ended up on the local news website, and, honestly, I just felt tired looking at it after months of being scared. Tom's divorce lawyer sent over more evidence 10 weeks after everything started, including emails where Megan literally wrote she would destroy that autistic B word and her handler, which is what she called Michaela. The prosecutor added cyberstalking charges when they found she'd been tracking our social media with fake accounts and screenshotting everything. Lily started having nightmares every night about bad people taking mommy away. So Michaela found a therapist who specialized in trauma for autistic kids. The therapist said both of them showed clear signs of PTSD from the investigation and would need months of treatment. Megan made bail after a week, but immediately sent me a Facebook message saying this wasn't over, and I destroyed her life. I screenshotted it and sent it straight to Morrison, and they arrested her again that same night for violating the no-contact order. Her bail got revoked and she had to stay in jail until trial. Then the wedding photographer called me because Megan left 43-star reviews on every platform, saying he ruined her wedding by letting that woman in white destroy everything. He was suing her for defamation and wanted my testimony about what really happened that day. I gave him all the screenshots and emails I had from the wedding planning, and Sophie organized a support dinner that same week at her place for Michaela and Lily. The whole wedding revenge squad showed up with food and toys, and Sophie's nephew played video games with Lily in the living room while we sat around the kitchen table, looking at legal paperwork. Sophie had found 3 different lawyers who specialized in false accusation cases, and Rebecca's cousin worked at the courthouse and knew which judges were good with these situations. Maria brought her laptop and started building a timeline of everything that happened since the nail salon, with dates and screenshots and witness names. Sarah's husband was a cop, and he explained how the criminal case would work and what to expect at each stage. Rachel made sure Lily got fed and comfortable while we talked strategy, and I watched Michaela's shoulders finally relax for the first time in weeks. 3 months after that first CPS report, we all packed into the courtroom for Megan's preliminary hearing, and the prosecutor laid out the charges, including making false reports and harassment and witness intimidation. Megan stood up in the middle of the hearing and fired her lawyer right there in front of everyone, saying it was all a conspiracy against her, and the judge had to bang his gavel 3 times to get order back. The judge assigned her a public defender who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, and set the next hearing date for 2 months out. I went back to work full-time the next week, trying to act normal, but everyone knew about the restraining order drama because Megan had called my office pretending to be concerned about my mental health. My coworkers were nice to my face, but I could tell they kept their distance. And my boss moved me to a different project where I wouldn't interact with clients as much. The damage was done even though the restraining order got thrown out. And I knew my career would never be the same at that company. Michaela called me crying one night because she found Lily hiding granola bars and juice boxes under her bed. And when she asked why, Lily wrote on her tablet that she was scared they would take her away and she wouldn't have food. The trauma from those CPS visits had created new anxieties that the therapists said would take years to work through. And Michaela had to add a nutritionist to their care team to help with the food hoarding. Megan's parents showed up at the next hearing with some expensive lawyer from downtown who tried to get all the charges dropped, claiming Megan had mental health issues that explained her behavior. The prosecutor wasn't having it and pulled out evidence showing how Megan had planned everything, including creating fake email accounts weeks before the wedding and researching what words to use in the CPS report to trigger an investigation. For months after everything started, Michaela finally went back to work part-time, but her boss told her the promotion she was supposed to get had gone to someone else because of the time she missed. She was understanding on the surface, but Michaela knew her career trajectory was completely derailed and she'd probably have to change companies to move up now. I found an online support group for people who had been falsely accused of crimes. And when I shared my story, dozens of people responded with similar experiences. Most of them said their reputations never fully recovered even after being cleared, and several had to move to different cities to start over. Megan's new lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal where she would get probation if she admitted guilt, but Megan refused and kept insisting she was protecting children from dangerous people. The security camera catching Megan's confession right when she thought she was being sneaky. How did she not notice that huge camera above her head? The prosecutor told us her refusal to show any remorse was actually helping our case because the judge could see she wasn't taking responsibility. The school called Michaela in for a meeting and recommended holding Lily back a grade because she had regressed so much during the investigation and missed too many therapy sessions. Michaela fought it, but deep down she knew Lily had lost months of progress and would need extra support to catch up developmentally. Then Tom showed up at the prosecutor's office with a USB drive full of files he found on Megan's computer, showing she had revenge lists on multiple people going back 10 years. There were detailed plans for destroying her college roommate who borrowed a dress without asking, and her former boss who didn't promote her, and even her hairdresser who cut her bangs too short once. The prosecutor said this established a clear pattern of malicious behavior and would help prove this wasn't just about the wedding, but part of a long history of vindictive actions. The local news picked up the story that night, and by morning it was everywhere. My phone started blowing up with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. 3 women reached out saying they'd been targeted by Megan too. The first one, Jessica, had worked with Megan 5 years ago at a marketing firm. Megan had filed a false harassment complaint after Jessica got promoted instead of her. Jessica lost her job and couldn't find work for months. The second woman, Amy, had dated Megan's ex-boyfriend. Megan called CPS claiming Amy was abusing her kids and dealing drugs from her apartment. Amy lost custody of her 2 daughters for almost 2 years while fighting the false claims. She was sobbing on the phone, telling me how her youngest didn't even recognize her when she finally got them back. The third victim was a college professor who'd given Megan a B+ instead of an A. Megan accused him of sexual harassment and nearly destroyed his whole career. The prosecutor added 3 more counts of filing false reports and 2 counts of perjury. The autism advocacy group started sharing our story online, and within days they'd raised over $30,000. People were sending checks, doing Facebook fundraisers, organizing bake sales at their kids' schools. I spent hours coordinating with the organizers and making sure every penny went to Michaela's legal fees and Lily's therapy. The support was overwhelming, but it also meant reliving the trauma over and over as I explained our situation. 5 months had passed since that morning at Michaela's house when the social worker showed up. Lily had started using her AAC device more, but what she was saying broke our hearts. She kept typing, "Mean lady made mommy cry and bad people take Lily away" over and over. Her therapist said it was actually good that she was processing the trauma, but watching this little girl struggle was killing us. Michaela had dark circles under her eyes and had lost 15 pounds from stress. Then Megan's parents showed up at Michaela's work with a cashier's check for $100,000. They cornered her in the parking garage and begged her to drop the charges. Megan's mom was crying, saying they'd pay for all the therapy and legal fees, plus extra for the trouble. Michaela pushed past them and went straight to security. She told the prosecutor she didn't want their money because no amount could give Lily back those months of feeling safe. I realized I hadn't had a full night's sleep since this whole thing started 5 months ago. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that social worker at the door or heard Megan's voice on that recording. My doctor recommended a therapist who specialized in trauma from false accusations. Sitting in her office that first session, I finally admitted how scared I still was. Kate agreed to testify from California, where she'd moved right after the wedding. During her video deposition, she broke down, describing how Megan had manipulated her for years. She said Megan would threaten to hurt herself if Kate didn't do what she wanted. The guilt of almost causing a child to lose her mother was eating Kate alive. She'd started therapy, too, and cut off all contact with her family. 6 months after that morning at Michaela's house, the trial finally began. The prosecutor laid out all the evidence, including the journal, the recordings from my phone, and testimony from 17 witnesses. He showed the jury the 147 pieces of evidence they'd collected, including text messages, emails, and social media posts. Megan sat there in a conservative suit, trying to look innocent, while her lawyer argued she wasn't guilty by reason of mental disease. Detective Morrison took the stand and explained how false reports hurt real victims. He said his department had wasted over 200 hours investigating Megan's lies while actual abuse cases sat waiting. He looked directly at the jury and said, "Every hour spent on fake claims was an hour a real child might be suffering." The whole courtroom was silent. When Michaela testified, she had to stop 3 times to compose herself. She described finding Lily hitting herself and pulling out her hair after the investigators left. She showed photos of Lily before all this happened, bright and happy at the park, and photos from after, withdrawn and scared. She talked about losing clients at work because people Googled her name and found the investigation. She described the constant fear that someone would believe the lies and take her daughter away. Several jurors were wiping their eyes by the time she finished. Then it was my turn to testify about everything, from the wedding setup to the false restraining order to finding my car vandalized. I played the recording of Megan saying she'd never stop until she destroyed us. You could hear the pure hatred in her voice as she detailed her plans. One juror actually gasped when Megan's voice said she hoped Lily ended up in foster care where maybe someone would teach that R-word some manners. The prosecutor asked me to describe the impact on my life, and I told them about the panic attacks getting worse and missing work for court dates. The judge called for a 15-minute break, and everyone stood up to stretch their legs. Michaela grabbed Lily's hand, and we headed for the hallway. But halfway to the door, Lily started making these high-pitched sounds and pulling away from her mom. She dropped to the floor right there in front of everyone and started rocking back and forth with her hands over her ears. People started pulling out their phones to record, and I immediately stepped between them and Lily while Michaela got down on the floor with her daughter. She pulled out Lily's noise-canceling headphones from her bag and gently placed them on her head while humming this little tune that seemed to help. Some old lady muttered something about, "Control your kid," and I turned around and told her to mind her own business. It took 10 minutes, but Michaela got Lily calm enough to walk to the family bathroom where they could have privacy. When we got back to the courtroom, Megan's lawyer said she wanted to testify, and the prosecutor looked like someone just told him Christmas was canceled. Megan took the stand and started talking about how I had turned everyone against her and manipulated them into thinking she was evil, when really she was just trying to protect children. She said, "I probably coached Lily to have that meltdown to get sympathy. And that Michaela was clearly an unfit mother if her kid acted like that in public." The more she talked, the crazier she sounded. And even her own lawyer kept trying to get her to stop, but she wouldn't shut up. She claimed I had stalked her for years and was obsessed with ruining her life because I was jealous of her perfect wedding. The prosecutor didn't even cross-examine her because she was doing all the damage herself. Her lawyer called a psychiatrist who said Megan had narcissistic personality disorder, but she understood right from wrong and knew what she was doing when she made those false reports. He explained that her mental illness might explain her behavior, but it didn't excuse it, and she had made calculated choices to harm people. During closing arguments, Sophie and Rebecca sat on either side of Michaela, holding her hands while the prosecutor laid out how Megan had weaponized the system meant to protect kids to destroy an innocent family. He showed all the evidence of her pattern of false reports and reminded the jury about that recording where she admitted everything. Megan's lawyer argued for mercy and said she needed treatment, not prison, but even he seemed to know it was a lost cause. The jury went to deliberate, and we sat in the hallway for 6 hours, drinking bad coffee and jumping every time the door opened. Finally, the bailiff called us back in, and the foreman stood up and read the verdict, guilty on all 12 counts. Megan screamed that we would all pay for this and tried to lunge at me, but the bailiffs grabbed her and dragged her out, still yelling threats. Michaela collapsed in my arms, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe, and I just held her while Sophie and Rebecca rubbed her back. The judge set sentencing for 6 weeks later and said Megan would be held without bail. But then her parents showed up with their lawyer and somehow got the judge to agree to $500,000 bail with an ankle monitor. We couldn't believe they were letting her out, but the prosecutor said not to worry because she would definitely violate the conditions. That night at Michaela's house, Lily came up to me and asked if the mean lady could still take her away from Mommy. Michaela tried to explain that she was safe now, but Lily kept asking the same question over and over like she couldn't believe it. She started checking the locks on all the doors and windows before bed and wouldn't sleep in her own room anymore. 3 weeks later, my phone rang at 2 a.m. and it was Michaela screaming that someone had spray-painted "child abuser" across her garage door in huge red letters. The timeline jumping from 5 to 6 months really makes me wonder how Michaela kept going to work every single day knowing people were Googling her name and finding those awful lies. Did she have to explain to each new client what really happened? The security camera caught everything, and there was Megan in her pajamas with the ankle monitor blinking on her leg. The cops arrested her within an hour, and this time the judge revoked her bail permanently, saying she was clearly a danger to the victims. I spent the next 2 weeks tracking down everyone Megan had ever filed false reports against, and 17 people sent impact statements to the judge. There was a teacher who lost her job, a neighbor who had CPS investigate them 3 times, a cashier who got fired after Megan claimed she was stealing, and dozens more. The prosecutor compiled everything into a 200-page document showing Megan's pattern of destroying lives with lies. At the sentencing hearing 8 months after that first CPS report, the judge looked straight at Megan and said her weaponization of child protection systems and targeting of vulnerable families was one of the most disgusting abusive process cases he had ever seen. He sentenced her to 4 years in state prison with mandatory psychiatric treatment and ordered her to pay restitution to all her victims. The bailiff led Megan away in handcuffs while her parents stood up from the gallery and approached Michaela near the prosecutor's table. Her dad's hands shook as he pulled out an envelope. Her mom couldn't make eye contact. They said they knew they'd enabled Megan for years, always making excuses for her behavior, always believing her lies over everyone else. The envelope had a check for $20,000 for Lily's therapy costs. Michaela took it without saying thank you. 2 weeks later, we all went to the Portland Autism Acceptance Fair at Pioneer Square. Lily wore her noise-canceling headphones and stayed close to Michaela at first, gripping her weighted stuffed elephant. Other kids were playing with sensory bins filled with kinetic sand and water beads. Lily watched them for 20 minutes before finally joining in. Michaela's shoulders dropped for the first time in months. She actually smiled when Lily started sorting colored pom-poms with another girl who was also non-speaking. Tom showed up at my apartment the next week with flowers and a letter he'd written in therapy. He explained how he'd ignored red flags because he loved Megan, how he'd convinced himself the wedding stress was making her act weird. His therapist helped him see he'd been in denial about her controlling behavior for their entire relationship. He handed me a cashier's check for $50,000 made out to the autism advocacy group that had supported us during the trial. I told him thank you, but we weren't friends. 3 days later, Michaela found Lily in her bedroom, lining up all her stuffed animals on the bed. She was using her AAC device to tell each one that nobody could take them away from Mommy, that they were safe now, that the bad lady was gone. Michaela recorded it on her phone, then locked herself in the bathroom to cry. A full year after that first CPS report, I was back at work, carrying pepper spray on my keychain. My coworkers didn't know the full story. I jumped when doors slammed. I screenshotted everything. I recorded phone calls. Megan had broken something in all of us that couldn't be fixed with therapy or time. Lily started 2nd grade that September with a one-on-one aide. She was 18 months behind academically from missing so much school during the investigation. Her new teacher just knew she was recovering from a difficult year. Lily worked harder than any 7-year-old should have to. She practiced writing her name over and over. She used her AAC device to participate in circle time. Michaela got hired as a marketing director at a tech startup downtown, but the year-long gap in her resume from the investigation was hard to explain. She told interviewers she'd been caring for a sick family member, not technically a lie. The background check showed the cleared investigation, but her new boss never brought it up. 6 months later was Sophie's wedding at the Japanese garden. Lily was the flower girl, walking down the aisle in her purple dress with her AAC device on a lanyard and her weighted vest underneath. She dropped petals in perfect intervals, concentrating so hard. When she reached the altar, she pressed the button that said, "Beautiful bride." And everyone started crying. Sophie hugged her so tight. That night, I finally wrote the blog post I'd been drafting in my head for 2 years. I explained how to recognize false allegations, what to do if CPS shows up, how to support families going through investigations. Within a week, it had 50,000 shares. Dozens of parents messaged me saying it helped them through their own nightmares. I turned our pain into something useful. The last Sunday in October, Michaela and Lily went to Laurelhurst Park, the same one where they used to sit in the car during the worst days of the investigation. Lily ran straight to the swings. Michaela pushed her higher and higher. Then Lily laughed. Really laughed. Not just a small giggle, but a full belly laugh that echoed across the playground. Other parents looked over and smiled. I watched from a bench with my coffee, seeing the little girl who'd been so scared she wouldn't leave her mom's side, now pumping her legs to go higher. We weren't healed. We'd never be the same people we were before Megan destroyed our lives. But Lily was laughing on a swing on a perfect fall day, and sometimes that's enough. It's been a long journey, filled with so much anger and fear, but also incredible acts of kindness and resilience. What would you have done if someone tried to weaponize a system meant to protect children against you or your loved ones? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts.